Everyone in the bakery stopped talking the moment the door opened. The sound of Claire's high heels on the wooden floor echoed like a warning bell. People moved out of the way. Some looked down at their shoes. Others just stared at the bread on the shelves, pretending not to notice her. But they noticed. Everyone always noticed when Claire walked into a room. She didn't wait in line. She never did. Claire walked straight to the front of the counter and tapped her red nails on the glass. "One chocolate croissant," she said coldly. "And be quick. I have better things to do." The young girl behind the counter, maybe 17, froze. She looked at the long line of customers who had been waiting. She looked at her manager, unsure what to do. "Are you deaf?" Claire snapped. "I said now." The girl quickly grabbed the croissant and placed it in a paper bag. Her hands were shaking. A little boy standing with his mother whispered, "Why does that lady act like she's the queen?" Claire heard him. She smiled. "Because I am," she said without turning around. No one laughed. Claire Dawson wasn't a queen by title, but in this town she might as well have been. Her father had been a rich businessman. When he died, Claire took everything: his money, his land, his power. And she used it like a sword. No one dared to cross her. She got what she wanted, always. If a teacher at the school gave her nephew a bad grade, that teacher would find themselves jobless within a week. If a waitress served her cold coffee, the whole cafe would be shut down after a surprise inspection. Everyone in town knew how things worked. Claire didn't need to shout all the time. Just one cold look from her could change someone's life. She walked out of the bakery like a storm, not saying thank you, not even paying. She never paid, and no one dared to ask her to. Outside, the sun was bright, but the mood in town was dark. People passed her on the sidewalk and gave fake smiles. Some greeted her with forced words. "Good morning, Ms. Dawson." But their eyes showed fear. Claire loved that. She walked past the school, where students avoided looking at her, past the library, where the librarian once tried to block her from hosting a loud event. That librarian had been replaced the next month. As she reached the town square, she saw a few workers setting up decorations. "Why are the flags so low?" she asked. One of the workers replied, "That's the height we've always used for the festival, ma'am." Claire tilted her head. "I want them higher. Do it now." "Yes, ma'am," the man said quickly, and the team began changing the flags. One of them mumbled something under his breath. "What did you say?" Claire asked sharply. "Nothing." "Ma'am." She stepped closer. "Are you sure? Because people who disrespect me don't last long in this town." The worker nodded silently. Claire gave a cold smile and walked away. Behind her, no one said a word, but they all thought the same thing. When will this end? Later that evening, Claire had dinner at the most expensive restaurant in town. She didn't make a reservation. She didn't have to. When she arrived, a family who had been seated near the window was quietly told to move. Claire sat at their table and ordered without looking at the menu. "I'll have the steak, medium rare. And make sure it's not dry this time. Last time it was terrible. If it happens again, I'll speak to the owner." The waiter nodded quickly. "Of course, Ms. Dawson." Claire sipped her wine and looked around. People tried not to meet her eyes. A man who had been laughing with friends suddenly stopped talking. A couple near the corner paid their bill early and left. Claire liked silence. It meant respect. At least that's what she told herself. But deep down, somewhere, quiet in her heart, she knew it wasn't respect. It was fear. Still, fear worked. It always had. Or so she thought. Because what Claire didn't know was that someone new had come to town. Someone who wasn't afraid of her. Someone who didn't care about her money or her name. And very soon, everything would change. It was a Thursday evening when Claire arrived at the town hall. She walked in like she owned the building. Maybe she did. No one was really sure anymore. The town meeting was about to start. Chairs were placed in rows, the mayor stood near the stage, and people were whispering among themselves. But when Claire entered, the room fell silent, like someone had turned off the sound. "I'll take the front seat," Claire said, pointing at the chair where the mayor usually sat. The mayor, Mr. Lyle, paused for a second. Then he quietly stepped aside. Claire sat down, crossed her legs, and looked at the crowd like they were her employees. "Let's begin," she said, even though she wasn't in charge. People shifted in their seats. No one smiled. No one laughed. But in the last row, near the exit door, a man sat alone. He was tall, with short black hair and calm eyes. He wore a simple jacket and jeans. He didn't speak. He didn't move. But his eyes followed everything Claire did. His name was Officer Dean. Nobody in town knew much about him. He had just moved into a small house on the edge of town. People had seen him jogging in the mornings or drinking coffee alone at the diner. He didn't say much, but he watched everything. And tonight, he was watching Claire very closely. On stage, Claire stood up. "This town is a mess," she said loudly, "and I'm the only one doing anything about it." A few people clapped, only because they were scared not to. "I spoke to the police chief yesterday," she continued, "and I told him to increase patrols. I don't feel safe walking at night. You should all thank me." Some nodded. Others looked down. Claire wasn't finished. "Also, I want the old library taken down. It's ugly. We'll build a fountain instead." The mayor cleared his throat. "Ms. Dawson, the library is part of town history." Claire raised her hand, cutting him off. "It's ugly. I said what I said." The mayor went quiet. In the back row, Officer Dean took out a small notepad and wrote something down. A woman in the crowd stood up. She was old, with kind eyes and a shaking voice. "But my husband built that library. He donated the land." Claire stared at her coldly. "Then your husband had no taste. Sit down." The woman slowly sat back down. Her eyes were full of tears. Officer Dean's jaw tightened. He wrote something else in his notebook. Claire looked around and smiled. "That's how this works," she said. "If you want things done right in this town, you do what I say." She looked like a queen giving orders. And no one said a word. But the silent man in the back row just kept watching. After the meeting, people began to leave quietly. Claire stayed back, talking loudly with the mayor, giving him suggestions that sounded more like commands. As Officer Dean walked past them, Claire glanced at him. "Who's that?" she asked the mayor. "Oh, new guy. Moved here last week. I think he's a retired cop or something." "Retired?" Claire asked. The mayor shrugged. "Maybe." Claire narrowed her eyes. "He better know how things work around here." Dean kept walking, pretending not to hear. But he heard everything. That night, as the town slept, Officer Dean sat in his small living room with the lights low. On the table in front of him were papers, names, and photos, all connected to Claire Dawson. He had seen people like her before, bullies with money, power used the wrong way, towns full of fear. But what Claire didn't know was that Officer Dean wasn't just a retired cop. He was part of a special task force that watched small towns for corruption. And he had chosen this town on purpose. He came not to live quietly, but to change everything. And as he looked at Claire's photo one more time, he said softly to himself, "Your time is running out." The morning started like any other at the town's public school. Children laughed in the hallway, teachers prepared lessons, and the air smelled of books and pencils. But inside the principal's office, something dark was happening. Claire Dawson was back. She stood with her arms crossed, her eyes locked on the school principal, a kind man named Mr. Lewis. Sitting next to him was Ms. June, a young teacher. With bright eyes and a brave heart, Claire slammed a paper on the desk. "This homework question," she snapped. "Was too hard for my nephew. He cried." "You embarrassed him. Apologize." Ms. June blinked. "It was just a reading passage for practice. He didn't fail." "I don't care," Claire said coldly. "You will never give him anything like that again." Mr. Lewis looked nervous. "Ms. Dawson, please, let's calm down." "Quiet," Claire hissed. "This is my town, my school. If she doesn't follow my rules, I'll make sure she never teaches again." Ms. June stood up. Her hands trembled, but her voice stayed firm. "I won't lie to my students. I won't pretend that he's right when he isn't. I care about my class, not your power." Claire's eyes narrowed. "Do you know who you're talking to?" "Yes," Ms. June said. "And I'm not afraid." Mr. Lewis looked like he had stopped breathing. No one had ever spoken to Claire like that before, not in years. Claire leaned closer to Ms. June. "You should be afraid." But Ms. June didn't back down. "If you fire me, fine, but at least the children will know what real courage looks like." Claire stormed out of the office, her heels clicking like thunder. "You'll regret this," she shouted over her shoulder. By lunchtime, the whole school was buzzing with whispers. She yelled at Ms. June. "Is she really going to get her fired? Did she really say she owns the school?" In the corner of the staff room, two teachers whispered nervously. "She's gone too far this time. But what can we do?" Across town, Officer Dean was having coffee at the diner. He sat at his usual corner table, listening to the quiet conversations around him. His ears picked up Claire's name, again and again. He took out his small notepad and wrote, "Targeted a teacher, public threat, fear increasing." He had seen this Patty. The sun was shining, but the town felt cold. Everyone had heard what happened at the school. Claire Dawson had tried to get a teacher fired, again, but this time it didn't work. People started talking, quietly, carefully, but it was the beginning of something new, and Claire didn't like it. She stood in her office, pacing. Her phone sat on the desk, silent. No one was calling her, not the mayor, not the school board, not even her usual supporters. "They're all cowards," she muttered. Afraid of one little teacher, her assistant, a nervous man named Greg, peeked into the room. Ms. Dawson, there's something you should see." "What now?" Claire snapped. Greg held up a small envelope. "It was left at the front desk. For you." Claire took the envelope. It was plain, no name, no return address. Just 3 words printed on the front in bold black letters. Public invitation. Inside, she opened it quickly. Inside was a card, town gathering. This Saturday, 6 p.m. Community Hall. Open discussion, everyone welcome. Speak freely. Special topic, power, respect, and fear. What does our town really stand for? Hosted by Officer Dean. Claire stared at the card. Her fingers tightened around the edges. "Who does he think he is?" she whispered. Greg swallowed. "Should I cancel it?" Claire didn't answer. She walked to the window and looked out. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a challenge. The next 2 days were tense. Flyers about the meeting appeared everywhere, on lampposts, shop windows, even at the school. People read them with wide eyes. Is Claire really going to show up? Do you think someone will finally speak against her? I heard Officer Dean is serious. Like, really serious. Ms. June saw one of the flyers outside the library. She smiled quietly and walked inside. There, sitting in the back, was Officer Dean. "You planned it," she said. He nodded. "It's time to let people speak, without fear." "They're still scared," Ms. June said. "They won't be for long," Dean replied. "They just need to see one person stand up." She looked at him. "You're not from here. Why do you care?" Dean folded his arms. "I've seen what fear does to a town. I've seen what power does when no one stops it. I care because someone has to." When Saturday evening came, the community hall filled up faster than ever. before. People came in groups, families, shop owners, students, teachers. Even the mayor walked in looking unsure. At the front stood Officer Dean, calm and focused. At exactly 6:05 p.m., the doors opened again, and Claire Dawson walked in. She was wearing a black dress and high heels, her face cold as stone. She didn't sit in the front this time. She walked slowly to the center row and sat down without a word. The room went quiet. Dean stepped up to the microphone. "Good evening," he began. "Thank you all for coming." His voice was clear, steady. "I came to this town looking for peace. But what I found was fear. Fear of speaking. Fear of standing. Fear of one person." He looked around. "That ends tonight." Claire raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Dean continued. "This is a place for stories, for truth. So if you've ever felt powerless, if you've ever been silenced, come and speak." For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, Ms. June stood up. She walked to the microphone. "My name is June. I'm a teacher. And last week I was threatened, not by a stranger, but by someone who's supposed to protect this town." Claire's jaw tightened. Ms. June's voice stayed calm. "I was told I'd lose my job, because I gave a student homework, because I didn't bow down. And I'm not the only one." She stepped aside. A shop owner stood next, then a librarian, then a mother. One by one, people told their stories, stories of fear, of threats, of Claire. The room changed. It was no longer quiet. It was brave. Claire stood up at last. Her voice was sharp. "You all blame me? After everything I've done for this town?" Dean stepped forward. "You didn't help this town. You controlled it. There's a difference." Claire looked around, searching for support, but found only silent eyes. "You think you can just take my place?" she asked. Dean shook his head. "I don't want your place. I want this town to belong to its people again." For the first time, Claire looked small. She turned and walked out, heels tapping like they had so many times before. But this time, no one moved out of her way, and no one looked away. The air in town felt different the next morning. The people who spoke at the meeting felt lighter, like they had taken their first breath after holding it for years. For the first time, they had not been afraid of Claire Dawson. But Claire? She was furious. She sat in her office, her hands clenched into fists. Her phone rang again, and she didn't answer. Her control over the town was slipping like sand through her fingers. She stood up and shouted, "Greg!" Her assistant appeared in the doorway, pale and worried. "Yes, Ms. Dawson?" "Get the mayor on the phone, now, and tell him I'm coming to his office in 20 minutes. Greg didn't move. He looked like he wanted to say something, but couldn't. "What are you waiting for?" Claire snapped. Greg swallowed. "Ms. Dawson, the mayor just released a statement this morning. It's public." Claire narrowed her eyes. "What kind of statement?" Greg handed her a printout. It was short, but powerful. A message from Mayor Lyle. This town should be led by kindness, fairness, and unity. I regret not speaking sooner. I stand with the people who shared their stories. We will no longer allow fear to lead us. Claire's face went pale. Even the mayor had turned against her. She crushed the paper in her hand. "Fine," she whispered. "Let them try." Meanwhile, Officer Dean was on the move. He met with Ms. June at the school, then with the librarian, the shop owner, and even the town's old newspaper editor. He wasn't just listening anymore, he was building something, a case. Because while Claire had bullied people in public, some of her actions were more than just rude. They were illegal, fake contracts, forced donations, fired workers without reason. Dean wasn't just a quiet man with a notebook. He was a trained investigator, and he was finally ready to take the next step. That evening, Claire tried to hold a meeting of her own. She sent invites. She even offered free food. But only 4 people showed up. She paced in the small hotel room she had rented for the gathering. "This is a joke," she said, glaring at the people who came. "Where is everyone?" A man in the corner cleared his throat. "Maybe they're tired of being scared." Claire turned to him. "You think they'll be better without me?" He didn't answer. Claire left the room before the meeting ended. She walked outside and saw Officer Dean standing by his car. She marched over to him. "You think you've won?" Dean didn't smile. He simply said, "It's not about winning. It's about justice." "You don't belong here," Claire hissed. Dean looked straight at her. "Neither do you." Claire opened her mouth to speak, but stopped when she noticed something in his hand. It was a folder. "Tomorrow morning," Dean said, "I'll be presenting this to the district office. Official charges, financial abuse, threats, harassment." Claire laughed, but it was shaky. "You think anyone will believe you?" "They already do," Dean replied. "You just haven't noticed yet." The next morning, the folder was delivered. News spread fast. Formal investigation launched against Claire Dawson. People gathered outside the town hall, not to protest, but to watch, to witness the moment their silence finally broke. Claire stayed inside her mansion all day, her phone off, her curtains drawn. She had lived like a queen, but the walls were falling. At sunset, Officer Dean stood at the park, where Claire once said she wanted to build a fountain instead of keeping the old library. The people had voted. The library would stay. Ms. June joined him, carrying a small box. "What's that?" Dean asked. She opened it. Inside was the superhero drawing Emily had made, the one that said, "You are brave. You are my hero." "She wanted you to have this," June said. "She said you're the reason she's not scared anymore." Dean looked down at the drawing, then back at the town around him. "No," he said. "The people were always brave. They just needed someone to remind them." The town was quiet, but not the kind of silence Claire Dawson liked. This silence was sharp. It came from closed doors, turned backs, and unanswered calls. People were no longer afraid of her. They were ignoring her, and that hurt more than any insult ever could. Claire sat in her mansion, staring at the large portrait of herself above the fireplace. She had paid thousands for it to remind everyone who ran this town. Now even she couldn't stand to look at it. She turned away. The news was everywhere. Claire Dawson under official investigation. Town officer leads case against powerful businesswoman. School board votes to keep Ms. June. Community celebrates small victory. Claire turned off the TV and threw the remote across the room. It hit the wall and shattered. "They think this is over?" she muttered. "They have no idea who they're dealing with." But deep inside, she knew the truth. She was losing. At the police station, Officer Dean met with the district investigators. He handed them every file he had, copies of fake donations, threats made through texts, proof of employees forced to work unpaid hours. It was all organized, clean, and strong. One investigator looked up and said, "This is more than we expected." Dean nodded. "She's been doing this for years. People were just too scared to talk until now." They shook his hand. "Thank you," one of them said. "We'll take it from here." But Dean didn't leave. "I'm not done yet," he said. "I want to be there when she's questioned." The investigator looked at him for a long moment and nodded. The next day, Claire received a formal notice. She was to appear at the town hall for questioning under law. Greg, her assistant, handed her the envelope with shaking hands. 1 week after the hearing, the town felt like a new place. People smiled more. Shops stayed open longer. Even the school hallways felt warmer, filled with laughter instead of whispers. The fear that once covered the streets like a shadow was gone, and no one missed it. Claire Dawson had left town quietly. No reporters, no goodbye speech. Just a black car at sunrise and a closed gate behind her. Her mansion sat empty. Dust gathered on her golden nameplate at the door, but life didn't stop. It grew. At the school, Ms. June was getting ready for a special day. The classroom was full of decorations. Students helped her hang handmade posters on the walls. Each one carried powerful words. Speak up. Be brave. Kindness is strong. This is our town. Emily ran up to Ms. June and held out a paper. This one's for the front, she said with a big smile. The paper said, Real power is helping others. Ms. June's eyes watered. A little. She nodded. Perfect. At the park, Officer Dean stood next to the mayor. They watched as a new sign was put up beside the old fountain. The sign read, Community Library, protected by the people. No one speaks alone here. The mayor looked at Dean. You didn't just stop her, you changed everything. Dean shook his head. I didn't do it alone. They just needed someone to remind them they had a voice. And what about you? The mayor asked. You going to stay? Dean looked out at the town, at the children playing, at the smiling shopkeepers, at the calm streets. I think I will, he said. Later that evening, a special town event was held in the community hall, the same place where people had once shared their fears. But this time there was music, laughter, tables filled with food. Ms. June stood at the front with Officer Dean. The mayor stepped forward and raised a hand. Friends, he said, tonight we celebrate something more than victory. We celebrate courage, truth, and a new beginning. People clapped, some cheered. Emily jumped up and down in her chair. The mayor turned to Dean. We are proud to welcome Officer Dean not just as a guest, but as one of us, a protector, a friend, and a reminder that no one is above the people. Dean smiled and stepped up to the microphone. I came here to escape noise, he said, but I found something better. I found a voice, a town that forgot how strong it was. And I just want to say this. He looked around the room. Don't let fear decide for you. Not ever again. The room filled with applause. Ms. June stepped forward next. I want to thank every student, every parent, every worker, every quiet soul who found their voice. This isn't just a better town now, it's our town. The cheers grew louder as the night ended. People walked home under stars. No one rushed. No one looked over their shoulder. Emily held her mom's hand and asked, Will she come back? Her mom thought for a second. Maybe. But if she does, we'll be ready. Emily smiled. We're strong now. Ms. June overheard her and said, Yes, we are. Officer Dean stood at the edge of the street, watching the families head home. The wind was soft. The night was peaceful. He looked up at the dark sky and said to himself, She demanded everyone obey her, but in the end, it was the people who stood tall, and with that the story of Claire Dawson ended. But the story of the town had just begun.